At our church, we grew up with this short film called Johnny Lingo, and you can find it on YouTube. It was made, I think, in, I don't know, like the 60s or something, but it was filmed like on the islands, or made to look like it was filmed on the islands, and it was about this little Polynesian girl who was treated badly by her father. She was emotionally abused, and everyone on the island kind of whispered about her being ugly. And they just called her, Mahana, you so ugly, you're ugly, all the time. And on this island, they had a bartering system for the wives to be sold to their new husbands. And the wives talked amongst themselves about how much they got sold for, kind of bragged about it. And it was common for a wife to be sold for 2 or 3 cows, and if you were sold for 4 or 5 cows, then you were pretty uppity. You were worth something, and they bragged about that. And there was this merchant who was pretty wealthy, who grew up on the island and knew this girl Mahana, and he always loved her. And I guess nobody suspected that, but he came back from his cells, I guess, and merchanting and came to ask for Mahana's hand in marriage. And everybody started gossiping and talking, and why would he ask for Mahana's hand in marriage? She's so ugly. She's so ugly. She's so awkward. She doesn't even know how to handle herself. She hides, and she doesn't talk well, and she's just not a good wife for Johnny Lingo. It doesn't make any sense. Maybe he's trying to make a deal just for a slave wife or something like that. And Johnny Lingo goes and meets Mahana's father. She's so embarrassed. The whole town comes to watch this barter deal, and the father's kind of awkward. Do I ask for 1 cow because that's all she's worth, or do I try and ask for 2 and then everybody will laugh at me? And so he decides that he's gonna ask. I think he asked for 2 cows, and everybody laughed. And Mahana was so embarrassed, and Johnny Lingo actually asked for 8 cows. And everybody laughs even harder. 8 cows was unheard of. And what happened was Johnny Lingo decides to take Mahana, and he marries her and takes her on this little honeymoon trip, and the town just kind of goes crazy, and they just start talking. When she comes back, everyone was surprised to see how much Mahana had changed. And she was beautiful, and she was graceful, and she was confident, and she was loved, and she looked like an 8-cow woman. And Johnny Lingo met with Mahana's father again, and Mahana's father was angry, and he said, you cheated me, Mahana is a 10-cow wife. And Johnny Lingo had to basically just kind of dismiss him off of his property. And the whole town was kind of in shock, and they were just like, what happened to Mahana? Could this really be the same girl that was so ugly, that was hiding in the trees? And And Johnny Lingo says, yep, it was the same girl. This is the same girl I fell in love with when I was a kid. She's always been the same girl. And I always liked that show. And I don't think it's to teach us to compare ourselves to others, but to teach us that the most important thing is for us to value ourselves as a 10-cow woman. And what happened to me and what happens to many of us when we are abused is that we start to believe that we're worth nothing when people treat us that way. And I started to see myself as really ugly and really worth nothing, even though I don't remember ever being told that I was ugly, like Mohana was. I began to see a reflection in the mirror of someone who was hideously ugly, like a monster. And it was something literal that I saw. And I still have a hard time looking at my reflection lots of times, but it's getting better. And I couldn't understand why some people would tell me that I was pretty every once in a while, until I saw one time on Oprah, there was this girl who was a model or had been a model, had some modeling jobs. And she saw herself as a monster, and she couldn't leave her room because of how obsessed she was about how ugly she thought she was. And it kind of intrigued me, and I just thought, like, how could this beautiful girl have the same feelings as I do looking at herself in the mirror? And I just kind of pondered on that. And then I found this book. Well, actually, my mom showed me this book, Confident You by Barbara Barrington Jones, and she's a Miss America or something like that. But this was a really interesting story too. But this lady right here, she was called the ugliest woman in Centerville. I think it was like published in a paper or something like that. But look at this transformation. This is her picture before, and then when she started to change how she believed about herself and she started working on herself, this is her after picture. And that's just based on belief, what she believed about herself. It was pretty incredible. And so that, I don't know, that's been something that's been on my mind a lot as I have been healing, and the days that I look in the mirror and I think, man, I'm so ugly. Like, today, I've had a couple of pretty bad ugly days after recording the podcast and having these feelings come out. If I'm, having bad days maybe with my husband or whatever, I might look in the mirror and just be like, man, I'm ugly. I feel ugly. I feel horrible. If I can remember that my feelings are sometimes reflected in the mirror, then sometimes I can let that go a little bit, walk away from that, and remember that another day I might see more of my beauty and know that it's there. So hopefully that helps.